Hello? Is this thing on? Is this thing recording? Can y'all hear me? Okay, so I am going to pick up here on week 2, day 1, and we're going to be reading. Wait, make sure I'm not redoing the same thing. Oh, I'm sorry. We're gonna pick up here. So we're gonna pick up on day 2, week 2. So I'm sorry, day 6 apparently. So scoping, alternatives, trade-offs, preliminary phase. We have 3 sections to read, and I believe I can get through this in an adequate amount of time. So we're going to be starting at 4.6 and we're going to 4.8. So just this little bit here. Okay, so 4.6, 4.7, 4.8. And today's topic is scoping, alternatives, and trade-offs, and preliminary phases. While I get my notes set up here, I want to tell you, during my time away, I had a small flashbulb moment, if you will, a realization. I know that this TOGAF stuff is really written for enterprises, but I've identified that in my heart of hearts, the real me, I've always dreamed of having this sort of maybe freelance-y type of career. I don't know if freelance is quite the word, but I've always fantasized about the idea of being able to just go out, find things that I care about and want to support, and make my living, support myself that way, as opposed to this whole like corporate beast, infrastructure monster, capitalism, whatnot. And when I first started studying this stuff, I didn't think that it would work necessarily for that. Or I thought, in order to be able to apply this to my own affairs, I would have to be this like seasoned expert veteran. but I'm starting to realize that that might not be true. Um, so many businesses, especially small ones, have technical debt and technical needs. And they may not be in the form of making production grade custom software, with coding and whatnot. But enterprise architecture isn't about coding. It's about using architecture to identify and create solutions, and then manage those solutions so that um, you know as a business scales and expands and has relationships, things can stay ordered and well governed. And with that in mind, I feel like this stuff can very easily be adapted for different types of business environments, even small or medium sized businesses, especially ones that are having a hard time at that weird intersection between being a small business and being a large business, or especially distributed businesses, where there is a broad um, range of connections that enable business processes, but they're not centralized, and they also don't have a central way of communicating or of documenting um, the relationship or the contracts in those relationships. So that's my current thoughts. That's a kind of a forming thing in my mind, but I'm going to do a case study after I do this foundations, or maybe even while I do this foundations. I want to do a case study to explore the ways to make sense of all of this in practical terms that I can actually access based on my position, like what I have access to in my community. Okay, so let's get to this. Scoping and architecture. Okay, there are many reasons to constrain or restrict the scope of an architecture activity. Okay, so we're talking about constraining the scope of architecture activity. That makes sense. Mhm. A set of aligned architecture partitions that ensure. Okay, that makes sense. Um, we're not working on duplicate or conflicting activities. Yeah. Definition of reuse and compliance relationships between architecture partitions. Okay. So we need to have breadth, depth, and width. Not width. Breadth, Johnny Depp, and time period, and architecture domains. Period. Okay. What is the extent of the enterprise, and what part of that extent is this architecture effort dealing with? Okay. What level of detail should the architecting effort go? That is something I struggle with. Um, I definitely struggle with trying to figure out like the appropriate depth when it comes to a lot of things in life. uh, yeah, that's definitely like if I ever had to interview, they're like, what's your weakness or your flaw? I would just be like, yeah, I get like really deep into things really fast. Um, which is not a bad thing because on the opposite end, there are people who are very shallow um, and struggle to understand the importance of having depth. And that's a whole nother issue, you know. So it's not like there's a one, you know, way is better than the other. But I definitely struggle with knowing, and I think that is something that can be solved. And I think the way that gets solved is by asking very insightful questions and doing insightful communication, I would say. Asking people, like, what is it that you want? And what is it that I think you need? And negotiating something in the middle of all of that. Because if I go just off of my own, you know, like they say that to a hammer, everything is a nail. I think that kind of applies to my thought process with this. Leave it up to me, and like you're gonna get the most perfect. You know, I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want to half-ass. I don't want this to, you know, I take my name and my credibility very serious. Like, and that's all fine and dandy and great, but that might not be what everybody is signing up for. And not just that part, it could also make my services or the value of my time cost prohibitive as well if I'm too deep and exacting with things. And it can and also people can get very overwhelmed. I've noticed as well. People get overwhelmed when you go too deep on something too quickly. They may not be able to keep up or quite understand the value of what you're suggesting or what you're doing. So yeah, establishing the appropriate level of depth, I think, is really important. You don't have to do every single thing. Things don't need to be perfect or ideal either. What is the time period that needs to be articulated for the architecture vision, and does it make sense for the same period to be covered in detail? The detailed architecture description. Okay. The architecture domains. The complete enterprise architecture description should contain all 4 architecture domains. Okay. So this just means like as we're planning things out, it's important to make sure that we're establishing some type of work effort to address these 4 areas and whatever plan we're producing. Otherwise, we're going to have gaps in our domains. And that don't even sound right. That don't even sound right. That sounds disasterful. So yes. Let's go ahead and transfer these. Something I've been doing lately, by the way, is I've been, even for things that I think I understand, one of my recent habits is to take the thing that I just read and to paste it in. So let me show you this thing first. Let me show you one thing before I get to this. Okay, so I want to use Gemini to help me understand things and also to help make sure that I understand things the way that I do, the way I think I do, right? Now, one of the challenges is I'm a listener more than I am a reader. Now, don't get me wrong, I can read good. Don't get it twisted. I be reading, okay? Pages, books, everything. But I prefer to listen more than I prefer to read if I had to choose. So it's sometimes easier for me to focus, and also it's just more quick as well. I'm not the fastest reader in the world. So what I did is normally I will go into Gemini and I'll say, hey, can you please explain the following um, and provide commentary for my understanding, right? So normally I'll do that and I'll paste it in. And for someone who wants to listen, the default output of Gemini is not necessarily the best for what I would call text to speech style writing. What that means is if you're trying to consume something in a auditory format that is generated by AI, you want that text to be formatted in such a way so that when it's being read by whatever engine they're using, that it reads smoothly, right? Like the way that someone who's speaking or lecturing would talk. So the solution that I have to encourage Gemini to have those types of outputs is I actually made a series of these are called saved info. So saved info is basically your ability to customize your Gemini experience by preloading it with your preferences, information, etc., etc. So I have some other stuff here that's unrelated to this, but what I want to show you is that what I've done is I've defined a style, and I call my style T3. What does T3 mean? It doesn't matter. I don't really know. I just picked a term that was unique enough so that I could use it in my prompts and it would know what I'm talking about with there being no ambiguity or mix up and it thinking it's something else. Okay. So I call it T3. T3 is just a custom style that I've created where basically I've told Gemini, hey, when you respond to me, respond in a scholarly persona that is formal, objective, and optimized, most importantly, for text to speech and readability. Use complete sentences. One of the things that I noticed that a lot of AI chatbots do is that they love to give bullets at lists. Everything's a bulleted list, and it's just like I'm reading all these bullet points, but I don't know what you're talking about, right? And it's just reading bullet lists is not reading. Okay, that's not how normal people read things. So I'm asking it to use complete sentences, and also to speak in a way that is simple and clear. Okay, my goal here is to understand, and I like to read and challenge myself to explore topics that are very advanced, complicated, and that oftentimes have very domain-specific terminology. And so I want to encourage it to to not use overly complicated sentences and paragraphs and stuff because that's going to help me understand. So yes. Uh, and here's another thing here. I'm asking it to use smooth transitions between sections instead of these like big headers so that once again it reads like someone talking to me rather than an article being read out loud. Explain concepts in simple, accessible language. Avoid assuming prior specialized knowledge. That's important. I ask it to explain key terminology and identify unique or specialized terms, that kind of thing. This is some other unrelated stuff. And then I came back here and I tell it to avoid. I should update this here. I should say T3. I always feel like I'm a rusty typer whenever I have not typed in a while and I start again because, I got that weird keyboard. Okay, so I'm adding a new T3 preference. And this one is to tell it to avoid bulleted lists and present information in a manuscript consisting of paragraphs. That's also important as well. So basically the point is that these style preferences that I've asked it to apply to its output, that's what's going to help it encourage it to write things in a format that is more easy for me to consume using the audio text-to-speech feature. So we're going to try that out. I just took this entire text from this section here, and I'm going to just go ahead and paste it in. I'm going to say, please explain this and provide commentary for my understanding. Actually, let's go ahead and use our TOGAF study bot. Um, oh, one thing that helps too is sometimes when you have those saved info, sometimes Gemini might not always understand if it's broken up into separate sections like I have it. You have to break it up into separate sections because you can only have so much info in any saved info entry. So another thing I do is I like to say, can you please recall the T3 style and print it out. So this is kind of a way to sort of prime it up, to get it ready to bring it all to the surface. And then from this point on, within this chat session, it's going to remain fairly consistent. Wait. T3 style is defined and saved. Actually, I don't know if this will work for custom gem. Looks like it doesn't. So we're gonna use the regular one then. So please review T3 style and print the guidelines for this output format. Okay, it should work here. Okay, so now it's saying here, hey, this is what T3 basically means. You can see here it's basically just regurgitating all the stuff that we just looked at. So now from this point, I can just go ahead and say, give me a T3 style commentary on the following TOGAF. And I can also go ahead and drop in the study guide. I happen to have that because I purchased it. I just gotta remember where I put it. Here it is. I can go ahead and drop this in here as well. And now it'll be able to review that document, find this section, and then give me a proper explanation. And I asked for it to give me commentary because I don't want it to just tell me literally what the text already tells me. I want it to elaborate and clarify the way that a commentator would on a text, like a teacher. So it's going to print out this beautiful text here. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and mute my music so it doesn't get in our way. And I'm going to go down to the bottom here. You can do this on your phone, by the way. On your phone, you can also listen, but I just click this button right here. And
this section,
now it's going to read.
Scoping in Architecture, explains the crucial process of defining the boundaries for any architectural work undertaken within an organization, often referred to as an enterprise. Site 417.
Okay, so you can pause as you go. It'll keep its place. The only thing is that there's no real way to get it to start reading at another section or speed it up. I'm sure they'll add it again. If you really wanted to have more fancy speechification, just get the Speechify app. It's way more nuanced and you have more control and you can read text on the DOM. But this is fine. This is also free if you have access to Gemini.
Deciding on the scope is essential because it sets clear limits on what the architecture activity will cover. There are practical reasons for limiting or constraining this scope. Often, the team creating the architecture only has authority over certain parts of the organization. Site 417. Additionally, the specific goals and the concerns of the people involved, known as stakeholders, might only relate to particular areas. Site 417. Lastly, limitations in available resources, such as people, funding, and time, naturally restrict how much architectural work can be done. Site 417. Properly defining the scope is vital for effective management and coordination of all architecture efforts across the enterprise. Site 417. It helps ensure that different architects or teams aren't working on the same thing unnecessarily or creating conflicting plans. Site 418. This coordination is often achieved through architecture partitions, which are essentially defined segments of the overall enterprise architecture.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down because I don't think the study guide actually gave me a definition for architecture partitions. Okay. I wish I had a beverage right now. I just had a protein shake. I need like some juice. I'm a juice person. So architecture partitions is defined segments, segmentaciones of the overall enterprise architecture. So I'm assuming that these segments don't necessarily have to fall. They don't have to necessarily be the same boundaries as the organizations within the enterprise necessarily. I mean, it's not saying that at least. That's probably a good follow up question. I'm gonna write that down too, so I can come back to it. Are these segments the same as organizational boundaries? Um, what I do sometimes when I'm taking notes is I have a very ADHD monkey brain, so I always have like a bunch of questions. Remember what I was saying earlier about I struggle with going into things too deeply too quickly, and then I just get like in a tizzy. I would just have like a section in my notepad where I write down my questions so that I don't forget them, and also removes the feeling that I have to go after them right now.
Site 418. Clear scoping allows these partitions to align effectively. Site 418. It also helps in establishing rules for how architectural components can be reused across different partitions and ensures compliance with overall standards.
Okay, so this is saying that um, when we have these partitions in whichever way they're defined, um, we need to have alignment, and that's kind of alignment is kind of the big thing I think architecture is about, because an enterprise once again is a collection of organizations within a business structure that have to be able to work together to accomplish a goal, a shared goal. And if they're misaligned, then this is going to go this way and this one's going to go this other way, and then everything's going to be chaotic. So when you have this scoping, when you're asking these questions about like how deep to go, what's the breadth, what's the time period, what are the domains that should be considered, and you're doing that for the architecture, and you're doing it across these domains, across these partitions, it allows them to align correctly. And then there's this part here about the reusable resources, or is it reusable architectural components. What that's saying is that when you're architecting, you have certain components. For example, you could have a customer in common, or you could have a piece of infrastructure in common, or you could have a business strategy in common, or something like that, right? A piece of an application in common. And ideally, when you're making these things, you're thinking about it like, how can we resist making things too specific for a specific problem, and making things more usable so that we can save time and create more efficiency within our within our architecture process, I guess. Like, you don't want to have to redefine things. Also, when you're working in an application like Archimate, you have the ability to define things as well here, and you can reuse those assets too. It should be a like a one-to-one reflection of the business enterprise structure, and so having it here defined and being able to reuse it allows you to have a single architecture repository that reflects across the different types of architectural work that you're doing. As far as my notes here, I guess I'm going to say scoping leads to alignment. And rules for component reuse. Okay. Component reuse. Okay, so let's continue forth.
Site 419. Typically, the process of scoping an architecture begins by considering three main dimensions: breadth, depth, and time period. Site 420. Breadth addresses how much of the entire enterprise the architecture will cover. Site 422. For instance, will it encompass the whole company, a specific department, or a particular business process? Site 422. Depth refers to the level of detail that the architectural description needs to achieve. Site 423. Some projects might require a high-level overview, while others need intricate detail. Site 423. The time period dimension defines the time frame the architecture aims to represent, particularly for the initial architecture vision, and whether this same time frame applies to the detailed descriptions that follow. Site 424. Once these dimensions of breadth, depth, and time are understood, architects can then select the relevant architecture domains needed to address the specific problem. Site 421. TOGAF commonly recognizes four main domains: business architecture, focusing on strategy, processes, and organization; data architecture, dealing with information assets; application architecture, covering software applications and their interactions; and technology architecture, addressing the hardware, software infrastructure, and networks. Site 188, 191, 425. While a complete enterprise architecture ideally includes all four, the defined scope helps determine which domains are most critical for a specific architectural effort. Site 421, 425.
Okay, that last one was really good. So, which are most critical? Critical. Critical ace. How many people we got at this stream? I saw 4. I think that's a record. Hey, we have 4 people. I'm famous. I'm basically famous now. Okay, so okay, that was good. I did have a question about the time period. My question is I just need more clarification. Like, really, what does that mean exactly? So I have 2 questions from this. I'm gonna do the time period one first. So please explain the time period. Do you mean do you mean that the time period consideration is about identifying a date and then what the architecture looks like or should look like at that point? I always forget where my question mark key is. There we go. Yeah, that was a little unclear how it explained it. So let's see what it tells me. I spelled breath wrong in here. I spelled it like how you breathe from your mouth. So, okay, that makes. I did not think this was right when I typed it. I just typed something. I typed something in there, but that's cool. Okay. Uh, Involves defining a specific time frame that the architecture is focused on. This period relates to establishing the planning horizon for the target architecture, which represents the future. So, planning horizon. Planning horizon for the target architecture. So when architects in the state of time period, they're indeed asking the question, what point in the future are we designing for? Okay, what point in the future are we designing for? That deserves some red inkledge. So when architects consider the time period, they are indeed asking questions like, what point in the future are we designing for? What time frame does this desired state need to be achieved within? This time frame is initially articulated in the architecture vision. And remember, the architecture vision, that's what we plan out at the onset of this. So we don't even get to doing any kind of architecturage until we have a vision. And that vision can be, I think that vision is supposed to be continuously developed. Let's go back and look at our graphic here. Yeah, so this diagram is not a sequence, but it is an iterative thing. And these can sometimes overlap. They should overlap to a degree. So this architecture vision, however, is needed before you can start to make motion on any of these things here. And the timeline is going to also be what tells you when this circle is going to become a loop to begin the next iteration. Okay, sometimes. Oh, okay. Sometimes overall vision might look several years in the future, but the detailed architecture work might focus on achieving specific milestone or transition architectures. Okay, so for long timelines, may involve transition architectures. Okay, therefore defining a time period helps expectations when the target state, intermediate states, and intended target, intermediate are intended to be realized and guides the planning and migration efforts. Migration efforts is what? Okay, cool. I think we're good on this section. Anything else? Oh, I had another question I was going to ask. Almost forgot about it. So my other question is about question about these segments. Are these segments? Let me remember what that section said again. Oh, partitions, not segments. I wrote that wrong. Particiones, not segmentiones. Okay, so are these partitions the same as the organizational boundaries within the enterprise? Now, something tells me that they are not, because you can have a segment that's defined between more than one organization, potentially, but that would mean a segment is like a concern. I don't know. Let's see what it says. Okay. I usually will use the audiation. I don't know what they call it. The read out loud feature when it's like a longer piece of text, and I feel lazy. when I feel tired?
That's a great question, as there is often a strong relationship between the two concepts, but they aren't necessarily identical. Architecture partitions can align with organizational boundaries, such as business units, departments, or divisions, and this is frequently a practical way to divide the architectural work. Organizing partitions along these lines often makes sense because different parts of the business may have distinct needs, processes, systems, and dedicated teams. However, an architecture partition is fundamentally defined as a subset of the overall architecture created to make it easier to develop and manage. While organizational structure is a common basis for this division, partitions can also be defined based on other factors that might cut across traditional organizational lines. For example, an architecture might be partitioned by major business domains or capabilities, like supply chain management or customer relationship management, that involve multiple departments.
Isn't this what I was just had said it did? Think so. Okay.
Specific large-scale programs are initiatives that span different business units. Distinctions in the architecture landscape levels, such as separating strategic, segment, and capability architectures.
Okay.
Geographical scope, where relevant. The key reason for partitioning is to manage the complexity of the enterprise architecture effectively, allow different teams to work concurrently, and promote the reuse of architectural components. The TOGAF standard suggests that the chosen partitioning model should reflect the enterprise's operating model, which encompasses how the business functions, and this includes, but is not strictly limited to, its formal organizational boundaries.
Okay.
So, while architecture partitions often map closely to organizational boundaries for practical reasons, the primary driver for partitioning is the effective management and development of the architecture itself, which might sometimes lead to partitions defined by other criteria.
Okay, cool. I think this sentence right here, this multi-part. Look how many. This sentence has 1, 2, 3, 4 commas in it. They could have just gave me. You could have just gave me this one sentence. That would have been fine. I'm not writing this whole thing. So partition model should reflect enterprise's operating model. Okay, so how business functions. And it can, but not always, org boundaries. Okay. Cool beans. That helps. And I don't think I have any more remaining questiones. I think questions is it pregunta in Spanish? How do you say questions in Spanish? Oh, uh, how to say questions in Spanish? Pregunta. Yes, I remember that from 6th grade. I got a pregunta. I got plenty of preguntas. I got a pregunta for you right now. Okay, so let's go to 4.7. I'm gonna do this in the inverse. Sometimes it's good to switch things up. There's no one way. Everyone has a different path. So you could also try to take the text that you're going to study, like the section, and you can just do that first, and then you can go back and read the text. So I'm going to try it this way. Can you do commentary on this text and explain in T3 style? Yeah. Oops, I did not paste the entire thing. Let me redo this. Apparently, I didn't copy the whole thing. Ugh. Okay. Where's my music at? Okay. I feel like not having music might be a good thing because then you can have your own music. Um, but I like to have a little something, something, you know what I'm saying? A little something, something going on. Okay, let's go ahead and listen to this.
Okay, here is a commentary on Section 4.7, Architecture Alternatives and Trade-off, presented in the T3 style. This section discusses the important concepts of alternatives and trade-offs in the process of creating an enterprise architecture. It begins by explaining that developing an architecture rarely leads to a single, perfect solution. Instead, it usually involves balancing different, often competing, factors or forces. This balancing act is what is meant by making trade-offs. The text highlights that there is typically more than one valid way to design the future state, known as the target architecture. Several different architectural designs might successfully meet the initial high-level goals outlined in the architecture vision, adhere to the guiding architecture principles, and satisfy the defined requirements. Because multiple valid solutions might exist, it is beneficial to
Wait. Several different architecture designs might successfully meet the initial high-level goals outlined in the adhere to guiding principles and satisfy the requirements. Okay.
actively identify and consider these different architecture alternatives. Exploring various potential target architectures allows architects and stakeholders to gain a deeper understanding of the different ways the goals can be achieved. Crucially, this exploration helps to clearly identify the specific trade-offs associated with each alternative, understanding what benefits one option provides compared to another, and what potential downsides or compromises might be involved. Presenting these different alternatives, along with their associated trade-offs, directly to the stakeholders, the individuals or groups with an interest in the system, serves a vital communication purpose. This discussion can help uncover previously unstated assumptions, hidden priorities, or requirements that stakeholders might have. Bringing these hidden factors to light early is important because they could significantly influence the final choice and design of the target architecture. The section also notes that the TOGAF standard provides a specific technique or method to formally investigate and evaluate these architectural alternatives.
Okay. A couple of questions come to mind, but I'm sure it's going to get into this. Let me just 1 second. Um, yeah, I'm assuming that it's going to tell us the actual methodology or the how. Um, really the level 2 test is more of a practical application type of test. So I don't know how much it's going to get into it now, but that's kind of my question is like, okay, yes, obviously we want to do multiple things and compare them in order to find the best solution or the better one for the context. But there must be some formal system for grading so that choosing the one to go with isn't just um, an emotional thing or a biased thing. There must be some way to grade. And what comes to mind immediately is a decision matrix and also a risk. What's a gap analysis and a risk assessment? But okay, this makes sense though. Those trade-offs, presenting these alternatives along with their associated trade-offs directly to stakeholders. Serves as vital communication. Unstated assumptions, hidden priorities. That's the thing that's interesting to me. What's a hidden priority? Hidden factors. Maybe things that people didn't tell you, or maybe I think what happens sometimes is like in business, someone will they'll have like a goal in mind, and they think that they're asking you to do what's in their head, but when they communicate that requirement to you, it isn't fully explanatory of like the essence of what they're wanting, although they may think it. And then as you start working on something, you start to realize, okay, there's something I'm missing here, or something that maybe they didn't think was worth explaining, or maybe they didn't think through their own assumptions or desires deep enough to properly instruct me in a way that is useful for solutioning. So when we're doing architecting, I would assume sometimes you come into situations where you're like, oh, well, they didn't think about this, or what do they want us to do here, or you know, or like which of these things is important if we do have to have a trade-off, like what are you willing to sacrifice, at least in this moment. So maybe it's stuff like that. So I think that's why communication is important. It's because stakeholders don't inherently know the territory. They may know the map, but they may not know the territory until someone goes out and explores their intention. And then they might even become aware or discover priorities that they just weren't keen to in the process of that communication. Okay, so I'm gonna take a break here. We've been streaming for 52 minutes. 52. I'm gonna come back in 8 minutes, and we're gonna continue for another 30. And I think I can get through. I can probably get through this whole thing. I am not going to do as deep of a deep dive, just so I can get through these 3 sections and call this a day, and then I can come back later on or whatever and do the next stream as if it's the next day, because this is going to be really short today. Okay, so yeah, give me 7 minutes. I'll be back. Don't go too far, but if you go anywhere, make sure you bring your twists on back to the wolf pack, and I'll see you here in about 7 minutes. Hello, I'm back. Okay, I'm back-ish. I put some hot water on so I can have some tea because brother is tired. Very tired. Okay, so um, we read this or listened to this before I went to my break. So let's go ahead and read this now. So, a series of trade-offs among competing forces. So more than one possible target architecture. And by more than one possible, meaning that would work with the architecture vision, principles, and requirements. So, hidden agendas, principles, requirements. This is our really one statement. Vision, principles, requirements. Okay, criteria A, B, C. Okay. Um, so my question, my pregunta is, how do you use it's probably going to have a whole section of this later on, but how do you use the vision principles? Or wait, first clarify what principles are. Just to make sure I understand what that means. I wonder if that's in my vocabularies. So principles are rules and guidelines for how architecture work is conducted. set of values. Consistent choices. Trade-off. Different parts of enterprise, ensuring decisions are governed effectively and provide a basis for evaluating compliance. Effective governance. So it'll be a rule and then a reason. So the rule will be a statement, and the reason will be rationale. I think I've said this in the past several streams, but whiteout is the goat of office supplies. If you don't know, catch me outside. How about that? I think my hot water is ready. I'm gonna go grab this really quick. I'll be right back with my tea. By the way, if you're still listening, this would be a good time to think about you're thinking about your career. It's gonna be very tempting to want to chase the dragon. The dragon is
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful. Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle
the way
functions.
that tech industry is.
Discovery Houston, prep to ATO.
Unfortunately, chase the dragon.
Baggage cleared orbit. Beautiful, beautiful.
Starting out, you don't always get the luxury of the experience to engage in that kind of philosophizing. Or if you do, there may not be much you can do about it. Right? There are times when we're at the whim. But in the long run, tech can really burn you out. All that glitters and all these things. You know who you are, and you know what the impact you will have on the world. That's where you're going to find satisfaction. And no matter what happens, you're going to be able to look at what you've done, accomplished, and feel really proud of yourself. Because not only did you accomplish it, and that inner conviction, oftentimes, is what will carry you when you're in moments of doubt and struggle. Give yourself something to believe in. It's powerful. And that's what life is about. Oh, I forgot to get a towel. Sorry. Or a napkin. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. You see how I did that? See how I delivered that philosophy as a time filler? Yeah. It's real smooth. Because I'm a smooth operator. Okay, I got 26 minutes and then I got to go. I got things to do. But I will be back on later on. Maybe tonight. It depends how I feel. Depends how I feel. I've been trying to relax a little bit. I don't think I'm going to go back to a corporate job. I have a feeling that I might end up just working for myself and using these skills to just do good in the world instead of being a power player. So that changes my timeline. But I will be back. So yes, we're gonna do this for 25 more minutes, and then we're gonna be out of here. Okay. No ashy lips on this stream. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Oh, I was gonna ask one more question. Explain how the vision, principles, and requirements work together with criteria to select an alternative from a number of options. My dog had such a good morning. I gave him so much attention this morning, and I did not rush. We went for a walk, and we hung out in the backyard, and I just let him eat grass. Which is, I know he really wants to do. He wants to eat grass and sticks, and as long as he doesn't ingest them, he can chew all day. And I let him do it. Apparently I'm a helicopter dog dad. I just be like hovering, like, don't do that, don't touch this. Today, I was just like, you know what? You're a dog. Dogs want to chew on sticks. I'd rather you do that than my table or something. Okay, this is done. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a listen. Let's see what it has to say. I always have to do it twice for some reason.
Okay, let's break down how the architecture vision, architecture principles, requirements, and evaluation criteria work together in the process of selecting an architectural alternative from several options, following the T3 style. First, the architecture vision, architecture principles, and requirements establish the essential foundation and boundaries for any potential solution. The vision sets the high-level goal and desired outcome for the architecture. The principles provide the guiding rules and values that any solution must adhere to. The requirements define the specific needs, functionalities, and constraints that must be satisfied. Together, these elements define the scope of acceptable solutions. Any proposed alternative architecture must generally align with them to even be considered viable. Once this foundation is clear, architects typically identify several different ways, or alternatives, to achieve the desired target architecture. These alternatives represent distinct architectural approaches or designs that could potentially satisfy the initial vision, principles, and requirements. To compare these alternatives objectively, specific evaluation criteria need to be established. These criteria are derived directly from the foundational elements, the vision, principles, and requirements, as well as specific stakeholder concerns. Criteria might include factors like cost, performance levels, security robustness, ease of implementation, flexibility for future changes, alignment with a specific strategic goal from the vision, or adherence to a particularly important principle.
We're gonna pause there. Okay. Establish essential foundation and boundaries for a potential solution. Vision is the high level goal and desired outcome. Principles, already got that one. And then requirements. We did the principles earlier. Principles was just the rules and guidelines. It consists of a rule and then a reason, or a statement and a rationale. So requirements are specific needs. Functionalities, constraints. And then we have evaluation criteria. And those are derived from the vision, principles, and requirements, as well as stakeholder concerns. So stakeholders might have some concerns that are not reflected in those 3 things. That's where you get the hidden agendas, principles, and requirements from. Is stakeholders didn't put it in the trifecta. They're holding it on the inside. That's why you gotta talk to people. Okay, let's continue.
With the alternatives identified and the criteria defined, each alternative architecture is then systematically evaluated against these criteria. This evaluation process clarifies the strengths and weaknesses of each option and, importantly, highlights the specific trade-offs involved. For example, one alternative might score highly on cost-effectiveness, meeting a budget requirement, but poorly on performance, potentially conflicting with a performance requirement or principle, while another alternative shows the opposite profile. Finally, the results of this evaluation, including the performance of each alternative against the criteria and the explicit trade-offs, are presented to the stakeholders. This structured comparison allows for an informed discussion and decision-making process. Based on the relative importance of the different criteria, which often reflects stakeholder priorities, a final decision is made. This could involve selecting the single alternative that best balances the various factors according to the stakeholders' priorities, or sometimes, insights gained during the evaluation might lead to combining elements from different alternatives to create a refined, hybrid solution.
Okay. So what this is saying is that, okay, so criteria, for evaluation, there's the criteria, there's explicit trade-offs, and those are presented in a structured comparison. This is up my alley. I love comparing things. I love ruminating. I love ruminating, so this is gonna work just fine for me. I might be too good at this. Yes, careers for ruminators 101. Okay. And then there's a discussion, I guess. Informed discussion. Discussiones. Based on the relative importance of the different criteria, final decisions made. Okay, sometimes insight might lead to combining efforts to create a refined hybrid. So sometimes select, sometimes hybrid. Okay. Cool beans. Let's do. Oh, we already did our highlightation. Okay, cool. Okay, so that really kind of like completes a section in my mind. This is everything from 4.1 to 4.7 is like everything to before you can start to actually think about the phases. You need to know these things. And 4.8 is the preliminary phase that sets up the actual ADM process. So at 15 minutes, let's make the best use of this 15 minutes. What I'm going to do, oops, my bad. Did not mean to highlight like that. What am I doing here? What did I do? I don't know what I just did. Why is it blue like that? What am I doing here? I don't know what's happening here. Let me save this, exit, and reopen. Try turning it off and turning it on again. Oh, shoot. Okay. Give me 1 second. My computer's like, doesn't like that I'm opening up this. Oh, this is so annoying. Give me 1 second. Well, this might eat into our remaining study time, honestly. It doesn't like that this is from an unverified source. So I have to go to my settings and tell it to open anyways and give it the password. Okay. There you go. We have been restored. I don't know what that was, what it was doing, why it was dark blue like that. Um, that was definitely weird, but we can undo that like it never happened. Okay. Whew. The stress. The stressiones. Let's check our stream. Okay, we're good. We're still good here. Are y'all with me still? Obviously the answer is no, because ain't nobody here. Okay. Enough self-deprecation. Let's go ahead and take this section, and I'm just gonna have it do a quick summarization, and then I'm gonna go, and then when I come back, I'm gonna pick up here with, you know, obviously a little bit of understanding before. Also on my note page is pretty full already, so I don't really have enough space on this particular page, and also it would be off topic from what's on this page anyways, so there is logical reason to separate this out too, even though my study guide is treating all three of these sections as the same. Sorry about slurping my tea in your ear. It's very unclassy of me. Okay, this section describes the preliminary phase within the TOGAF framework. Its fundamental purpose is not about designing the architecture for a specific business problem yet, but rather establishing the ability within the organization to actually perform architectural work effectively. So we're coming back to things like architecture principles and whatnot. I'm going to set up my new page so I can kind of jump back into this easily when I return. So we're going to say A D M preliminary phase phase. I have not had solid food today, and I'm a little bit hungry. I might have to get like a bar or something on my way out the house. I have not been eating fast food, and I've been trying to be more selective about the quality of food. And it's times like these when I'm just like, give me the beef. Give me a hamburguesa. Por favor. But I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Not today. Not today, Satan. What does this mean? Source 434? I don't know what that number means. What does source 434 mean? That's not a page number. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So I didn't know that. That's what this is saying is that so there's a content retrieval process that AI uses whenever it's dealing with a large document, and basically it breaks the document down into segments that are not the same as like pages, and these numbers are references to those segments. But I don't know why it's telling me that about these segments. So, well, it's fine though. We'll just read this manually. Okay. So yes, so setting up the ability to perform architecture work effectively. Preparation and setup required before embarking on a significant architecture project. Um, Using ADM to design the architecture capability. Oh, so ADM is used to set up an organization for ADM. Interesting. Architecture capabilities is just like any other organization within an enterprise. I think that's what that means. I would love to work in this part of the architecture world and setting up the capabilities and governance. I don't know, something about that just feels like it just feels like a vibe, you know what I mean? It includes establishing architecture governance, which refers to the processes and structures for managing and controlling architecture work. Underlying meta model, organization's specific needs. Furthermore, it involves defining the organizational structure for the architecture team, establishing the processes they will follow, creating a plan or roadmap for developing the capability over time, and generally putting everything in place to build and improve. I feel like I'm getting emotional. This sounds like me. Okay. Creating a plan or roadmap. I love making plans and roadmaps for developing capabilities over time and generally putting everything in place and build and improve this architecture functionality. Well, to determine precisely what kind of architecture capability, needs and desires, and second, to actually establish the capability. To achieve the objective of determining the desired capability, activities include reviewing organization's overall situation, identifying which parts of the organization will be affected by the architecture practice, understanding how existing methods and processes will interact with the new architecture capability, and setting up a target for the desired level of capability maturity, how advanced the effect and effective the architecture practice should become. Activities focus on the practical setup. This includes defining the organizational model, setting up the detailed processes and resources for architecture governance, selecting and implementing necessary software tools to support architecture work, and defining the initial set of architecture principles. I wonder what it's like to work for a company that's like a startup and it's just like ragtag, vibe coded, whatever, just slapped together, and then to be able to go into that kind of organization and just like set them up and fit them, fit them out with like the stuff. That sounds like that would be really exciting work to do. It could also be very stressful. I mean, you would have to be quite a secure business or have a lot of faith, because that sounds like a lot of overhead to do that. Okay, so I think this is a good stopping place. I've been streaming for an hour and a half, so that's 90 minutes is actually really good. That's a good amount of time. They say that 90 minutes is the normal capacity people have for maintaining attention and being productive towards learning goals without having a significant break, meaning lunch or a transitionary activity. Anyways, that's just an excuse. I'm going to get off of here and mind my business. That's really what I'm trying to say. You be good. Stay safe, y'all. Bye. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, let's do my formal get out of here speech. I love to give a good speech. Let's see. I'll just repeat what I was saying earlier. And which is this.